There's a very big question as to the anchor babies. They've been talking about it for years. There's a very big question as to whether or not the 14th Amendment actually covers this. We're going to find out whether or not it does. Changing the 14th Amendment would take years and years, the long, drawn-out process. A lot of people think that it is absolutely, in terms of anchor babies, that it is not covered. So we're going to find out. Many of the great scholars say that anchor babies are not covered. We're going to find out.
Donald, there are no great scholars who say that. There are few things more deeply grounded in American law than the simple fact that babies born in this country are citizens of this country. It was formally written into the Constitution in the 14th Amendment in 1868. The first sentence of the 14th Amendment says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No court has ever found a hint of ambiguity in that sentence, but it was already the law of the land long before the 14th Amendment, and it always was for everyone except slaves. The 14th Amendment was written after the Civil War specifically to clarify that former slaves were citizens. For everyone else, there was never any real legal doubt about this. The first known legal challenge to this enshrined principle came in an inheritance case in New York. A 14-year-old Irish girl named Julia Lynch was the beneficiary of a substantial inheritance from her uncle, who had done very well in the mineral water business in Saratoga Springs, New York, which still produces the most beautifully bottled mineral water in the country. In fact, for the better part of 100 years, Saratoga Springs water was so dominant in the mineral water business that mineral water in general was known as Saratoga water. Julia Lynch was legally challenged as being ineligible to receive her inheritance because she was not an American citizen. The first sentence of the judge's decision in that case describes Julia Lynch's brief residency in the United States, which ended before her first birthday. The defendant, Julia Lynch, was born in the city of New York in 1819 of alien parents during their temporary sojourn in that city. She returned with them the same year to their native country and always resided there afterwards. Judge Louis Sanford, who wrote the opinion in the Julia Lynch case, went on to describe the history of American law on this subject, which predates the Constitution and predates the Revolutionary War. Remember, American law existed before there was a Constitution. 13 years passed between the beginning of the Revolutionary War and the ratification of the Constitution. And before that, before the Revolutionary War, the colonies were subject to both British law and American law that was written in each of the individual colonies and applying to each of those individual colonies. And as Judge Sanford noted in the Julia Lynch case, the common law by which all persons born within the king's allegiance became subjects, whatever were the situation of their parents, became the law of the colonies and so continued while they were connected with the Crown of Great Britain. It was thus the law of each and all of the states at the Declaration of Independence. And so, birthright citizenship has been an unshakable principle of American law since colonial times. The influence of English common law on American law was as strong after the Revolution and the Constitution as it was before. Judge Sanford noted, the Constitution of the United States, as well as those of all the 13 old states, presupposed the existence of the common law and was founded upon its principles. And of course, the common law included birthright citizenship. And so it was without any legal strain at all that Judge Sanford found in favor of Julia Lynch, writing, It is, therefore, the law of the United States that children born here are citizens without any regard to the political condition or allegiance of their parents. And that law of the United States applied to an Irish baby born in New York City in 1819 who left the country within months of her birth and never returned. Such is the inalienable right to citizenship for babies born in the United States of America. Donald Trump's wishful thinking cannot rewrite that law, cannot rewrite the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. He cannot rewrite Judge Sanford's opinion about Julia Lynch's citizenship, written 24 years before the 14th Amendment.
Why don't you have your guys file a federal suit now? You should do it tomorrow.
We're going to test it out. That's going to happen, Bill.
Donald Trump will not find a legal scholar to mount a court challenge to birthright citizenship. The Julia Lynch case can never be reversed. In court, Donald Trump wouldn't have a chance against Julia Lynch, a 14-year-old Irish girl who lived in the United States for only a few months and who came by her American citizenship the same way Donald Trump did, by being born in New York City. So, as the Irish say, raise a glass to Julia Lynch. And tonight, at least, make it a Saratoga water for once.